Hey y'all, Tim Risto here, host of the Creative Christians podcast, back for another episode of Tim Talks Christian Rock. Today I just wanted to share with you about some new old vinyl that I got kind of a few deals on eBay, and they came today unexpectedly. I thought they were going to come next week, but they actually showed up today. So I thought I'd share just quickly about some of these. Maybe there's some favorites in here of yours. Maybe there's some stuff you'd love to share about why any of these albums have touched your life. But some of these are pretty old ones. Most of these are pretty old ones, but they're kind of cool old vinyl finds. I got about 12 albums here, and I got them on a buy two, get one free deal. So each of these were about $9 a piece. They look to be in pretty good condition. Some of the vinyls are kind of dirty, so I'll have to clean these and see. Maybe varying conditions overall. We'll see how these all turn out. But for some of these at $9 a piece, I was willing to take a chance. First up, Barnabas, Hear the Light. This is their album from 1984. This is the Light album reissue. They actually had released this album on Tunesmith albums. And then when they switched labels to Light Records, Light released the first two albums, which is what they had, I guess, at that time, with different cover art. I believe the mix is exactly the same. They just changed the cover art, which in some ways is not as good as the original cover art, but it emphasized the band. Hey, this is Barnabas. These people are Barnabas. I've got all of Barnabas albums on vinyl, including the Tunesmith releases and then the Light Records release of the first album, which was Give Your Heart a Home. Was that the first one? I think so. Anyway, so the only one I was lacking was the Light reissue of this one, and I found it in this deal. So, cool album. My favorite song off of this one is Father of Lies, which is kind of a heavy bass line rocker of sorts, kind of slow paced, and got this reverb echo to Nancy Mann's vocals, and has this kind of sped up ending to it where the word lies keeps going. Anyway, that's one of my favorite tunes. I listened to it back in high school. It was one of the ones that first attracted me to Barnabas because I heard it on the radio, and I thought it was pretty cool. So a little mixed bag because it's one of their earlier albums, so there's some stuff that's really good and some stuff that's a little more varied. They were kind of in a punk, new wave-ish phase on some songs and harder rock on others, but some good stuff on here. Next up is Pat Terry, The Silence. This is one of his rock solo albums. He had, I believe, 3 solo albums. Humanity Gangsters, which I've got coming. Film at 11, which is another great album. And then this one, I believe, was his last one for a long time. And then I think he's done some more in more recent decades. Some other, maybe a couple other solo albums. But the last of his rock solo albums. So The Silence came in 84. I believe Film at 11 was 83 and Humanity Gangsters was 82. He did all these after forming and being in the Pat Terry group, of which they did, 5 or 6 albums. They were more of a gospel acoustic influenced group. And then he went into his rock phase, which was my most favorite phase of his career. So these 3 albums are really quite good. These, in particular this one and Film at 11, have a very Mark Hurd acoustic style, which is no surprise because I think he produced these. This was engineered and mixed by, and it was produced by Pat Terry and Mark Hurd, yes, and engineered and mixed by Mark Hurd as well. Even the vocals of Pat Terry on this have a very Mark Hurd-ish sound. It almost sounds like Mark Hurd on a number of songs, both Film at 11 and The Silence. And I love Mark Hurd. He's great acoustic rock style. Very, very cool. And Pat Terry emulates so much of that here. So very, very good album. Lots of good tracks on here. My favorite off this one is probably Deception, the 3rd track on side 1. Really cool song. I know these are on YouTube, so if you want to get a chance and at least listen to his albums. They are not on CD, so finding the vinyls of these is kind of nice. I have no idea if they'll ever make it to CD. Again, don't know where the masters are for a lot of these Christian artists. Many of them were destroyed when secular labels bought out the Christian labels, and who knows where half of that stuff is, if any of it even exists anymore. But great album, great rock acoustic album. Check it out. Michael Omartian's White Horse. Don't know a lot about Michael Omartian. He's a big part of Christian music history. This, in a lot of early Christian best of album lists, 100 greatest album lists and things like that, this one was often listed in years past. It's kind of I haven't really listened to it much. I've heard snippets of it here and there. I think it's kind of a unique, obviously more 70s vibe. This is 1974, probably a little more experimental style. I'm not sure. I need to listen to it more. But this is one that I saw. It was at such a good price that I thought, I need to pick this one up. I've heard so much about it. Give it a listen. So obviously I don't have a favorite song. Well, actually I do. The first song on here is Jeremiah, which was actually re-recorded by Russ Taff on his first solo album, Walls of Glass. And I always loved that song. Russ Taff's Walls of Glass was actually the first album I actually bought when I got into Christian music. I started getting much more into Christian rock, but I did love a lot of tracks off that Russ Taff album. I just thought that was his song. Then as I learned about this album, I realized, oh, Jeremiah, I guess that was written by Michael Omartian and re-recorded by Russ Taff. So anyway, love the album art on this. Really very cool. So I look forward to listening to this and getting more familiar with White Horse. This one here, Glass Harp's self-titled album, their debut album, I believe it was. This was Phil Keaggy's band, and he was becoming a Christian, I think, during this time. But anyway, this is a wonderful 70s. In fact, this is from 1970, I do believe. I don't know. I think it's 1970, though, but really, really cool album. Favorite track on here. I don't remember my favorite track on here. There's one I listened to. It's one of the longer ones that kind of goes on for a bit. I don't think it's Look in the Sky. That's 8:10. But it might be one of the longer ones, maybe Changes or Whatever Life Demands, but it just kind of flows really well. It's a great acoustic song. Anyway, Glass Harp, I used to have their second album, It Makes Me Glad, which had Do Lord on it, but that's okay. I don't have that anymore because I also got this one in this deal, Phil Keaggy with Glass Harp, Song in the Air. This is really a Glass Harp compilation album, which has, again, some really cool cover art. I think Phil Keaggy talks on his website a little bit about the design of this album art, and that they're trying to really kind of, for one of the first times, because this was 77, anyway, one of the first times, try to visualize, some spiritual elements in an album art like this. Really kind of cool. But anyway, what I was going to say is that this compilation has Do Lord on it on side 2. So even though I no longer have It Makes Me Glad, I still have Do Lord along with some other great songs. And I'm not sure exactly which albums all of these are from. But anyway, look forward to listening to this album as well. White Heart Hotline. This was a early influence album for me too. This is from 1985. This is really, for me, when White Heart started to take off. I wasn't a big fan of the first 2 albums. I liked Vital Signs, the song Vital Signs. The rest of the album really didn't impress me that much. I loved the album cover for it, but that was about it. Then when Hotline came out, they kind of really started to take off. And then after that came Don't Wait for the Movie, when Rick Florian, I believe, joined the band. But this one for me had a much more rock vibe to it that I was in tune with. More of the tracks did than not. This is very keyboard driven, so it sounds more dated in many regards, but I still like the energy behind the songwriting and the music on this album. It was more in a rock vein that I was seeking out at that time, and I kind of like the album art too. It's just really cool. Next up, Vector, Mannequin Virtue. This is one I heard back in the day. I have not listened to it since, but I remember the title track really well, Mannequin Virtue. It's a cool album. Again, very kind of 80s new wave-ish pop sounding album. It features Charlie Peacock and Jimmy Abegg, both who went on to do other things. Charlie Peacock, big solo career. Jimmy Abegg did some solo work too. Also, Steve Griffith is on here. I don't know what he went on to do, but cool album. And again, another nice find. One I look forward to re-listening to again because I haven't heard it in literally decades. I always love the album art on this too, and the band name Vector. Mannequin Virtue was a cool album title too. So if you like Vector or any new wave Christian bands like that, let me know. Who should I listen to? All right, I got some Larry Norman finds too. This one here should be familiar to most Christian rock fans. Larry Norman's In Another Land, the third part of his trilogy. I do have the second part, and now I've got the third, but I still haven't got his first part of the trilogy, so I need to find that yet. But this seemed like a good deal. This was also one of the first albums I ever had when I first got into Christian rock that a youth counselor gave to me. And so this one has a special place in my heart. Still love listening to that every once in a while. Also, Streams of White Light into Darkened Corners was another one. This one I've actually never owned before. This is one that's kind of a satire, as it says, of a lot of the secular songs of the day. Spirit in the Sky, Bridge Over Troubled Water, My Sweet Lord, things like that he re-recorded in kind of a comedic vein in some cases. Some are a little more serious than others, but I think he kind of redid the lyrics. But it's kind of an interesting experiment. It says part one, but I don't think there was ever a part two that I'm aware of. But anyway, kind of fun to have and listen to. And then one of my favorites of his, Larry Norman, Something New Under the Sun from 1981. Yes, this one I really liked a lot. Kind of brought things forward for me after listening to his trilogy for a long time, and then kind of hearing something that was closer to my era there in the 80s, even though it still got kind of his style. But I really love Watch What You're Doing, one of my favorite tracks. Hard Luck, Bad News is good too, Leaving the Past Behind. Some good stuff on this album. This was another one of his albums that was, more original material. So often he recycled a lot of songs, and some albums were just recycling of old stuff with maybe an occasional new bit here or there. But this was one of those since the trilogy that really was, new and fresh and felt original again. Greg X. Volz, former lead singer of Petra. This was his first solo album, The River is Rising, from 1986. Good, strong start. This one to me is almost as classic as a lot of the Petra albums he did. And it's a little more dated, of course. It's got a lot of keyboards in it, so it's got a little more dated sound. But I love the music on this album. I love his vocalizing on this album. I just love it as a whole. The album artwork is really cool. There he is on the back. He was kind of, in some ways, on top of the world, starting out his solo career after having a very successful run with Petra. This is just, to me, a classic album. I think this was produced by Jonathan David Brown, who also produced a lot of the Petra albums that he was in. And I think Never Say Die, More Power to You, and Not of This World. I believe Jonathan David Brown produced all three of those. Have to check to be sure. But so this is a really strong lead out album for him for his solo career. Classic. Last but not least, I've got Born of Water by Jeff Johnson. Also has David Friesen and Dave Hagelgans on it. This is a very jazzy, almost new agey sounding kind of music style. I'm not actually a huge fan of this particular album of his, but I love Jeff Johnson a lot, particularly through his art rock phase of albums. But this one was, I believe, his last vinyl release of his run of albums. So he started, I think, in the 80s or maybe even late 70s. Went on with some great albums like Shadow Play, Icons, The Awakening, a lot of great stuff like that. A Fallen Splendor. And he moved through a lot of different musical styles. Like I said, I like the art rock phase of him the best, but he's got some great albums. He got into a Celtic phase for a while, but before he got into that, he was in this jazz phase and worked with some other artists to really produce a jazzier sound. So I thought, well, I've got virtually all of his others on vinyl. Here was his last vinyl release, and I thought I'd just pick that up. kind of for completionist's sake. There's some cool stuff in here. It's always had some neat artwork, album art. And to the credit of these albums that I got, all the inserts and sleeves and everything are with them and intact, so it's kind of nice. Again, I need to listen to these vinyls and see what kind of shape they're in, but I'm really pleased with this selection that I got. I'll update y'all later and let you know if the vinyls are completely worthless or are actually in pretty good shape, but they look decent. So let me know what you think about any of these albums. Were any of these favorites of yours? Do you have any of these in your collection? Why do you enjoy them? And are there any other great albums of classic Christian music that you think I should be looking for? Let me know. Hope you're having a great day.